So, intense work, fan club, I can see. Nice. The fan club in the audience, that's nice. So we will let the audience process a little bit the movie, and we will. I will ask you a few questions to start. But first, we would like to get to know you a little bit, and I would like to ask you, how did you get to work in the movies? Did you always want to do this kind of job, and how did you think about editing?
I studied film directing. I think it's something I wanted to do for a long time already. And I started working on this film I remember while studying, I saw a film of Johan, Dial History, felt an artistic connection with that film, and contacted him to do an intern job there. Then I was an intern for a year. Then Johan was in a very early stage of developing this film. We started editing for a few days, and it clicked immediately. And voila, I stayed the editor for now 4 years later or something.
And was editing already in your mind before that, or did you?
Yeah. I also, what I like about Johan is that he doesn't see editing as something you do afterwards, but really as the space where you write your film, where you create your film. So as a director myself, I'm really interested in this method as well. And so I was interested in seeing how he works or something, and really how this film was made is really in the editing. It's not that there was first a script, then this was a plan, and then you start to put the dots behind each other. This movie grew organically through experiments, playing, researching. In the editing, it was made there, and that's because it was such a nice project, and that's why I stayed there for so long. Voilà.
So editing was really writing in this case. We usually say that editing is another writing, a rewriting of the movie, but here it was like the main or the first writing.
Yeah. And maybe interesting to say is like what editing is for me, because it's always in most of the films something vague, or because it's like an acting you can understand. You see the actors say their lines. Filming, you see what the lenses the DOP use, the shots or something, so it's all visible, but editing is, except in this film maybe a bit less, but normally very invisible. What editing is for me, I can maybe tell are like a few things. So first thing is maybe this technical know-how, like having your projects, knowing how it works, just knowing your technical skills on one hand, but next to that, editing is also like being a bit of a therapist for your director, who's like in a safe space, vulnerable, not knowing a lot of the time, not knowing what to do, like trying to tell something and not knowing how to tell it exactly. And then as an editor, through questions and dialogue and together searching, you try to find with the director what he wants to tell. So you have this position of empathy. And then you're gonna look with the perspective of the director. You're gonna search what his or her perspective is. And like with Johan, it was what I tried to do, like look through the archives, the footage with his eyes, and with his empathetic way of working, try to imagine how he would want the edits to be, and like edits in character or something you could say. But next to that, I think editing is also a bit of a collaboration. I think in the best cases, and was here, is like Johan as a director sees me as an editor and sees my potential, let's say, and directs me to do what he thinks I can do best and push me to do better or something. And me as an editor tries to push Johan to be more Johan, let's say, was in this case. And I really had the feeling with this film it was a really fruitful, creative collaboration where he really, for an example, he really appreciated my way of working with music, like the editing of music. So he gave me a lot of freedom to experiment creatively with how to edit the music in this film, which turned out to be like a big part of the DNA, the signature of the film.
So it's really like a duet with the both of you, a duo, or you really are working together most of the time?
Yeah, I think every film is a collaborative process. I think it's when in society, when we talk about films, it's sometimes very abstract to you look at an individual and you want to imagine like out of the mind of this director comes this movie, but it's never the case like that. It's always a collaborative experience in every film. You saw the end credits, all these people, all these names, they all did their part and collaborated with them and made the best out of each other. And it was really a creative environment where Johan is like the realisateur, the driving force or something.
So Soundtrack is really an archive film. Johan didn't shoot a lot of things except with Jean Boffan, the writer. How much of the archive did you find with him? How did it work finding the archives? Were they there when you arrived, or did you find them all the way long? How did it work?
Before I answer that question, I have this idea about this film that I want to explain, and that is that I think that it's the way that it's made is like very contemporary. You have this. There's this perspective on film history that you look at it through the lens of technological evolution. Like you had silent film and then sound was invented and it changed the way stories are told and it changed the form and the narratives. And later when cameras became smaller and cheaper, it changed also the way fiction was made and stuff. And like for me, this film is also like a product of the technological advancements of this time and really on a especially on the editing part, because like the editing software of the last 10 years or less is really advanced a lot, and it opens, according to me, a lot of possibilities to work in a different way with this software and creates different types of films, a different form. I say this to answer your question. That's, according to me, how we made this film is very contemporary. Like there were a lot of different phases in it. The first phase was like there was a bit of archival material already. Johan did really a lot of research. He read all the books and collected what he could find online already. So we started with that by making folders with the subjects already, and deciding what the names of these folders were already decided how the film would be made. So we had 3 big folders, which was history, music, and poetry. And so the decision to work with these 3 folders already decided what this film that you then years later see would become. Then second part was when Johan and I started editing together in the beginning. There wasn't a big idea of how the film would look, so we just started playing and experimenting and just trying stuff out in the edits. And we did this on my laptop, and at the same time, while editing, we had different ideas for to try other stuff out, but we were like, it would be nice if we found a shot of an elephant somewhere to put here. And then at the same computer, we went on YouTube and started going down rabbit holes on YouTube to suddenly find the shot that we were looking for. Most of the time not finding it and finding something completely else that we suddenly found beautiful and put in the film. And so there was this very speedy, contemporary way of working where I developed this workflow where we were like really in the editing software and on the same computer scrolling through the rabbit holes of YouTube and really having every film that's available on there at our disposal, and like putting it in my YouTube download software, downloading it, putting it in a media encoder from Adobe to make it ProRes, so that that's a codec that makes it that's Premiere works fast on. So really put it in the media software, then put it on the backup hard drive, put it in the correct folder on the other hard drive, and immediately in like a few minutes this process was, put it on the timeline where we were editing on. And so that was like really a amazing part early on in the process, where we really were like editing with everything on YouTube at our disposal and really just playing around and going in rabbit holes and getting somewhere completely else. And then after a while, we had a lot of scenes. We had developed the language of the film through these experiments. And then there was this phase, I think, where we started to have a rough cut. So we combined all these separate scenes we developed and put them after each other, which, of course, completely changed the relationship between the edits. And so then we re-edited every scene to make it fit with the other one. And then after a while, we created this narrative, this beginning to end film that's far from resembles what you see now, because at the same time it became clear what the movie will be. So then Johan went to research more, but more specific. We went to archivists and asked them very specific questions like, hey, now we see the film before us, can you look for these shots? So we had more professional than Johan and I, the YouTuber detectives. So then we asked more professional archivists to really find like beautiful archival footage that we couldn't find. And then at the same time, we kept on editing and changing the structure, and that was a different... Yeah, sorry if I'm talking too long.
No, it's okay.
It's a really long process, this film, so a lot to... very long explanation to explain this, but... so we had this big timeline, which was constantly changing, and for me as an editor, this was a very challenging part of the process, because like every time you change a small part in a scene, it creates like these butterfly effects in other parts of the film. So we were every day changing the scene, and every day I was like adjusting all the rest of the triple down effects it had. And so for me, this is also a very contemporary way of working, because the speed of the editing software allowed to constantly make these changes at the level that we were thinking of them or something. And wait, now yeah.
So it wasn't linear. It wasn't there was no beginning and no end at the beginning, and it grows from itself, like an organic living, getting bigger and bigger, I guess. Or, yeah.
I think that's indeed what I try to say. Like this movie grow organically, and less than earlier or something. It's not that we finished one part of the film, we finished the writing, we finished the research. It all happens, everything all at once at the same time. And then my role as an editor was to try to keep an overview of all the changes we were making. And then after a while, that was, I think, the deepest part. I was like in the film, and I was really editing it like on a daily basis for a really long time already, so I knew where everything was. And then we were like, when we made changes to the scene, we suddenly discovered like, hey, but if now we made this like this, then actually the version of the film we had half a year earlier, how we edited this scene earlier, would fit perfectly with how the scene is now. And so the editing process became really non-linear, and I really loved this speed with which I could jump through previous timelines we had made, like really jumping to the edit of a week earlier, the edit of half a year earlier, and really like it became like this multiverse of like having all the options open and really jumping all the time between them to create these new edits, which again made the film grow more organically. And then maybe to round this up, the final part of the editing was the bit of a wake-up call. Was like Johan and I, we were so long playing with this multiverse and this butterfly effect and like everything changing all the time, and then came the reality check of like
the producer says, no, you have to stop.
Yeah, producer says we have to stop. Every shot that you ripped years earlier from YouTube needs to be cleared the right from that. and then started, I think, a huge job for not me and Johan, for Sarah and Remy and the producers and the archival producers to really look at all the shots we used and see where they're from, who has the rights, and what they would cost to use. And then we discover, like, hey, this 1 second of beautiful clouds would cost a few €1,000. Could you maybe use these other clouds that are free? And then we would say, no, we really love the clouds, they need to stay. And then this moment of negotiation between, okay, you have this, but this would cost like this, and there is no money anymore, and stuff like that. And how can we make it a reality or something? And also the music, clearing of the, so as you see, like the music is it's not an afterthought, it's not late under the images afterwards and easy to replace. So it really also grow that the songs and how they're interwoven in the edits came about. And so then in this reality check phase, it was really hurtful to suddenly hear that like the family of Nina Simone is not that happy or cheap with her legacy. So it would cost so much if you use this song from her. Could you maybe use another song? And then also like this Kill Your Darlings phase with like discovering, okay, we really can't use that song. We need to re-edit the whole scene with a different song, which, were some sad goodbyes.
So those were the last polishing you had to do, but I'm curious what was there at first. What was the brief at first? Because for us, the point of entry is music and jazz musicians. Was it the brief at the beginning, or how did it begin?
So before I was on board, Johan had read a theater play by David van Rijbroek about two termite scientists, and there was a love story, and it took place in the Congo, and he was going to adapt that, and it turned out to be this film. So again, this word organically, how Johan works is he starts somewhere and then somewhere completely else, and it's with this constantly leaving the research open. So yeah, this I imagine like the termite scientists in Congo, which made him do more research about Congo. I think at a moment Dag Hammarskjöld would be the main character, then discovering that he's not like this hero as he's presented, and then going by doing more and more research and suddenly discovering, hey, Louis Armstrong went to the Congo. Wow, this jazz music, what is about that? Let's research more, and that's how the jazz entered. And again, it's wonderful to approach films like this organically and not like this supply chain or something where you have one phase, stop it, then go to the next phase, finish that, and then give it to the... so everything was happening all of the time at once, and so the story grew, changed constantly with the research and stuff we found, and voilà.
I was a questions, but maybe someone in the audience wants to ask a question or say something.
Hi, so you just said that 95% of the movie is based on music and archive. I'm really like often when you start a movie as a filmmaker and you say you want to use archive and music, the producer says, do you know how much it's going to cost? So I'm really curious how you managed to sell that idea to producers and how they cleared all the rights.
The producer is there. No, again, I'm not going to answer that question because as an editor, I got paid, I got my daily fee, let's say, and it wasn't my problem. So for me, the editing was really this bubble, this creative space of, for me, it was important to create this space of possibility and invention, and let's do whatever and deal with the consequences later or something. And I think it's a luxury position, really, that I think as a first-time filmmaker, I think you can't afford or something. I think Johan proved with previous films that so he's an established filmmaker who proved that he can make beautiful stuff out of it. I think because of that, he could afford to work like this, to have this freedom or something. Because indeed, I agree, I think the film proves that it's how do you say, this freedom was not taken for granted, but really the freedom that we got, we try to take the most out of it, let's say, but it's indeed not something that everyone can permit themselves of doing.
Still, despite the freedom, you still had the reality check at the end with the songs and the clouds.
Yeah. Maybe also to add, like, I think we at one time, for an example, had like 45 minutes scenes connected to each other. And to give an example, they weren't cleared, but this edit was considered very strong and was like submitted to the fundings, and so it convinced a lot of fundings like that it would be great or something. So it was again the funding process was also part. It wasn't that the money was there in the beginning, so it also grew while the film proved itself to be great or something.
Do we have another question or comment over there? Oh, we have two questions, so maybe we can take the two questions in a row and then you can answer.
Maybe I could be stupid because I've got stupid questions. Because you got archive editing. Are you an archive editor or an editor? That's the first question. I just define what's the difference between an archive editor and an editor. Because I can see like archive work is someone else looking after the archives and research and all that stuff. But you kind of editor, using that field to do this. I'm sure it was a long process to do so. That's the first question. Second question, how long does it take to you to process all these folders, history, music, and something else, I think, music, poetry, history, and...
Poetry.
Poetry, exactly. So it's a long, long process. And how long does it take? Thank you very much for your answers.
So first question, I'm an editor, indeed. Archival editing is a bit different, indeed, but I don't consider myself... I edit other stuff also that's with actors and films and stuff like that. What I, maybe to add on that, is what I love about archival editing is you work with already edited footage sometimes. So you really start to analyze this footage in a different way because you see where other people a generation or two ago laid cuts or something. And so it really, by recutting these cuts, you discover something about what it says. I can give an example with that, like the newsreel of Lumumba getting captured. We had the American version, the British version, the Belgian version, the French version, the Russian version, the Cuban version, all using the same footage with slightly different edited or something. One had to focus on Mobutu as the strongman, or one on Mobutu as the villain. One showed Lumumba's wife crying, the other showed Lumumba as this. Yeah, the villain, the communist. So it's really interesting to see these differences in laying cuts, and again, yeah, what it tells already about this media manipulation and stuff like that. So, what was your second question?
How long did it take to browse through the folders?
So I feel. As an editor, these projects and all the folders, I consider them my house, where I lived in for a few years. And it was wonderful, like when I, as an editor, come on the project for a short time, when they have already edited a lot, and I come there as an additional editor for a few weeks. I consider myself a visitor. I don't know where everything is, and I don't try to touch too much because I really am afraid to misplace something or something, but in your own house, you know where everything is. You enter, you throw your jacket there, blah, blah, blah. You can navigate through it really well because you build it slowly, so you know where everything is. And it's with this film, because I really worked so long on it, it's in the final part or during the half, it was a wonderful experience to really feel at home and really, as I tried to explain earlier, like really be able to navigate so quickly through this vast, to so much of this footage or something, because it was really a huge archive. We really had so many subfolders, and like going back to the edit we made last year and the edit of 6 months ago, and really be able to navigate through all this stuff was, for me as a really geeky experience, it was wonderful to be able to do this so quick or something, because I really felt at home in this project. I started, the first editing day was in January 2020, and the last was 1 year ago, I think, on 1 September 2023. So, but I also did other stuff in between, so it was not non-stop. I think the year 2022 was really almost every day, but no, not weekends, but yeah, voilà. So yeah, it was a long process, let's say, yeah.
We had another question up there, and then another one here.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, it's a very interesting movie, so yeah, thanks for presenting it. And my question is about the use of like contemporary ads in the movie. So there was like a couple, like Tesla and Apple, obviously highlighting the use of like, you know, lithium, cobalt from the Congo, so continued exploitation. So is that something that you had in mind kind of early on, or was that like the YouTube rabbit holes, like YouTube ads popping up and you're kind of linking the modern products with this kind of the uranium, for example, in the movie itself? So like, so kind of creating a parallel between two moments, we'll say.
Yeah, so it happened very late, and I consider Johan and I, when we're together editing, a bit like children. Are we gonna do this really? Oh yeah, okay. And then the producers more being the parents, like, and like this adding of the ads was really not really half a year before Edit Lock, I think. Really as a almost, wow, what if we put like this Tesla ad in there? That would be really powerful, but nah, it's not gonna work. It was really weird, but like an hour later we would have a test screening and we're like, yeah, just put it in and see how the people react. And then it was the test screening, and the people reacted very positively. And what I personally like about these ads is that they're, so you just saw the movie, 2 hours and a half, information overload of so many pieces, but you mention them, everybody knows what you're talking about, so that you can't say that about every shot in the film, let's say. And so they work really well, I feel also. And what I personally like so much about them is how it's triggers something internally that's uncomfortably close, because you, like when I watch YouTube stuff, it's like this ad pops out of nowhere, and you're so used to this, you zone out almost. You don't notice it. It's just it's this by a computer designed interruption in the middle of a film or something, and so you're watching this film about this very complex subject matter that's really mapping out a very complex system of how the world works, let's say. And it's, with archival footage, maybe very easy to look at it as it's from the past or something, and then suddenly have this feeling of this experience you have every day watching on YouTube, and an ad pops up or something, makes it suddenly very confronting, I think. And I think it's you don't need a third or something. It's set with that. A lot is being said with not much there.
We have another question here.
In the film, all images are shown in their origin state. But since you seem to be amazed about the new possibilities of technology, have you ever wondered about using AI to restore or even improve the image quality?
Yeah, so we started in 2020, when was like this boom that suddenly AI became like this big thing. We were almost finished already. So also Premiere now has very nice AI functions, but they're on, I have like in my mind a to-do list with things I want to research, but it's still on there. So I personally like the making, how do you say, the making images clearer. I really don't like it because it makes them more contemporary. Also, we sometimes slowed images down, and I like that you see the frame rates. I like that you see the technicality, and like the using of AI to make it clean. For me, it would sanitize this or polish it and make it. The power of archival footage is for me the historical moment or something that's captured there, and why hide it? I think AI as a tool. I think if it can help you to get faster to a creative use of it, I'm open to it. But no, with this film, I don't think we used it that much. No.
And you needed the layers of time so we could see history.
Yeah.
We're going to take a question here.
So my question is really, what is your thought on how you use your archive, like your archives, because it's a lot of copyright infringement also, and it just reminds me a lot of how would you respond if a piece of your film would be used?
My wet dream is to have to one day make a film and have it on Pirate Bay or something. I also know Johan, he talks a lot about this concept of the commons. I feel if you dive deeper into the archival worlds, I feel it's a very dirty world where the rights aren't with the people who own the images, and that it's, I know another example of like, you sometimes have like, a far cousin from the artist or something that just doesn't care about art being made and just wants to earn money and really asks a lot of money and takes artists that try to make new work with it just pay or something, and that's so I feel it's a horrible world. Again, me as an editor, I'm not. I just work here, man. No, I was just there playing with it, and I outsourced these concerns, or it was more Johan's responsibility. I didn't consider it my responsibility. I understand the choices to not do it, but me personally, I'm open to, I think, yeah.
And you talked with kind of a lot of families, actually, like the family of André Bloin or the family of Jean Boffan. A lot of families were implicated in the movie.
Yeah. So like André Bloin, her daughter was very involved with the project, and she gave her the home videos of her mother for us to use. The same with Jean Boffane, his home videos we could use. So it's not only these horror stories. There are a lot of people very happy when they see the film to feel connected to what it's trying to do to help it. So it's not only this horrible story of people trying to get rich or something.
So, your question?
Yes, thank you very much. Congratulations with this overwhelming work in every sense of the word. Very music-driven, and I'm wondering, at the end we have this performance of a symphonic orchestra in the United Union Assembly with cello, and I was wondering, because there are no titles, there is no contextualization about it, and I was wondering if it was not possible to incorporate it more in the story.
Hey Michel, I had a class from you. Nice to see you. Yeah, so this specific case, I don't know the name anymore. Pablo Casals. So do I have time to talk more about music?
I wanted to talk about music, Edna,
voilà.
because music is so interwoven in the
Yeah.
story that I wanted to ask you if editing was kind of making music or about rhythm
Yeah.
and how did it work in the editing room with the
Yeah.
music. So
Okay.
let's
Yeah.
talk about music.
Yeah, but more specific, that case, yeah, so the idea behind it was you have Dag Hammarskjöld. So in the United Nations, there's this yearly music performance, and it's with Pablo Casals, who performs in the United Nations. It's a juxtaposition with what we just saw Congo Müller say, yeah, I think everybody remembers, I don't need to repeat it, and then that he also goes to the Goethe Institute to witness high art, let's say. And voilà, it was a juxtaposition we made with then Dag Hammarskjöld talking about music being the universal language or something, I remember. And voilà, it's different way that we used music in this film to really contrast this idea that high art is above this horrible, banal things. It's I need to think now of like funny games of Haneke or something. I think Haneke does this technique also a lot. Voilà, to use this contrast with violence, or Kubrick with Clockwork Orange, or this technique, let's say. What you say now, I think about it. There's because everywhere is the song title is used and not there. You mean, or yeah. We'll call Johan, then he opens the edit again, and then we can re-edit or something.
And maybe last question about music and rhythm. How did you build rhythm with the images, the archives, and the music itself?
Yeah, so about music, it has a lot of functions in this film. More maybe to link it back to what I was, this thing I said about like that the movie is very contemporary. So I really think editing software is at such a speed now that you can really edit in a different way than like 10, 20 years ago. It was more like slow. You need to interpret what you're gonna do and then see what is in time will be. While it's the moment now, sorry. I really press play and we're watching the edits, and while it's passing by, I adjust stuff while we're watching it or something. And so this speed really made possible for me to develop this way of editing that's way more rhythmically. How I edited parts of this film, I see it sometimes more as like action painting or something like this. The button I use most is Command Z, like undo, and I'm really just constantly clicking. And half of the time I'm clicking on the wrong thing, and I just press undo. But it's more to keep being in a rhythm than to edit like rhythmically or something, to keep in a flow, to be able to construct the scenes as they are or something. Then maybe something else interesting to say is how I approach this music. Is important that I'm not a jazz buff. I approached it with a lot of ignorance. I really didn't know a lot about this music, but I was this ignorance was so nice because I was discovering it all the time, and I really tried to capture this enthusiasm with discovering this beautiful music and how brilliant these artists are. I really remember very well, like understanding Thelonious Monk by editing him for a few weeks, or to really understand that the way he plays, that you have this beautiful rhythm, and then he decides to play around it or something. So you need to imagine the nice song around the allegedly mistakes or something. And it's really through editing that I started to understand what's the brilliance of what they're doing. And so I really love this discovering of this music and how it works a lot. Then of course, what the film does is you have the narrative layer of the music. You have Louis Armstrong going to the Congo. You have Abbey Lincoln screaming at the United Nations. But next to that, also, I think maybe important is what we discovered during the playful editing parts, the beginning, the experimenting, is like how the political is musical and how the musical is political, and how they really define each other. And for me, you see it best in, we use a lot of speeches. So a lot of, you see Khrushchev speaking, you hear Lumumba speaking, Malcolm X, and how all these speeches are also performances. They're also rhythmic in a way, the way they pause, the way they have a singing voice or not, or how they're very false or something. So every voice has their own rhetoric, way of speaking. And by combining this with music and making it sometimes sound as if it's the lyrics of the song, for me it accentuates that there's always something musical in these performances, these political rhetoric, this what they're doing. And vice versa, I think, by combining political speeches with jazz music, it defines the jazz music and how it has something political always in it. I think, I'm now thinking of, you have like this small scene, it flies by very fast, of an interview with John Coltrane about that he went to see a speech of Malcolm X, and then the interviewer asks like, is there a relation between Malcolm's speeches and the music? And Coltrane links it, says it for me very well. He says, music can create the initial change in the thinking of the people. And so again, like there's this relationship between how abstract jazz about this, let's say with moments free jazz, like this wall of noise, or how there's something really political in there. And I think I'm happy with how the film captured this. And then another thing music does is, so again, the footage we use, it's from a perspective, like I said, like it was edited already, you have the Russian perspective, the Belgian perspective, but some of the footage we use is also maybe a lot from the colonial perspective, like really filmed. I'm thinking of the day of the independence, like King Baudouin entering in his ivory white costume and stuff like that. All the footage we use there is filmed by a Belgian royalist, let's call him, who's really, and it has this paternalistic, racist perspective on the happenings, and it's filmed from this perspective. And then what I think, to combine this then with Eric Dolphy, it deconstructs this perspective. So again, this music redefining what an image is or something. So that's another way that music is used in this film.
That's fascinating how you retell stories which have been told already with another point of view. I think we could talk for hours, but we will have to stop. So I just have a quick last question for you. We always ask our guests what advice they've been given or they would give to someone who wants to be an editor, for example, today, because we usually have a lot of students. So what advice would you give, or you've been given that was useful?
I think I didn't say it enough, but my position in this film was really to be proud of my, to embrace my ignorance about certain subject matter, because I really think like I didn't learn about all this stuff at school. It was all while editing it. At the end, now I'm an expert. I know them all, and the dates and the locations and all the stuff. But in the beginning, it's really, I didn't know anything about this, and this ignorant, not knowing perspective, I try to embrace it. Like, I think it's important as an editor maybe, because I can have more empathy with the audience that also doesn't know about these things. And I think Johan really is a huge expert on this matter, and he made this film from this expert position, and I think it was very helpful that I was on the other side. On the other side, is this the cue? Stop.
That's a cue.
No, I was on the other side trying to embrace the perspective of the audience, not knowing everything, and trying that it remains an information overload or something. But I really did my best to look at it from a perspective like, okay, it remains an information overload, but told in such a way that you have breathing room to process everything or something. although I still think you don't need to follow everything of these films. You need to embrace the chaos of this film, and then you see something else that you don't get if you read everything and understand it or something. It's really, you embrace yourself in this film, and you feel the complex system of what it's trying to tell. I was giving advice about what to do. So I think what I wanted to say is, like, this was my first huge film to edit, and I think this position as being young and ignorant, not see it as a weakness, but really as an advantage. Again, as I talked about this, that you can now do something with editing software that you couldn't do a few years ago, 5 to 10 years ago, then I think bring this as an asset. You're more open to reinvent, to try stuff out, to experiment, because you're not that experienced or something. That's an asset. That's a nice pep talk.
Well, embrace your ignorance. That's a nice advice. Thank you very much, Rick, for this conversation. The movie was released yesterday, so do not hesitate to talk about it around you, to your friends, family, all the things.